Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm Dominique Jaramillo, your astrologer and host. I believe astrology can fast-track personal growth, improve relationships, and empower parents. On this show, I will bring you practical guidance and insight from my own work, studies, and life experiences, as well as interview experts to bring you stellar wisdom from other teachers and professionals to inspire you on your journey. I'm so glad you're here and thanks for tuning in. So sit back, enjoy the show, and be sure to follow, like, and subscribe to catch every new episode as soon as it drops. Okay, let's dive into today's show. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm going to be here again today for episode 2 of our blend of astrology and IFS. And today we're going to pull back the lens and look at the self, the sun in astrology and the self, that core personality, identity, self-expression, highest self-expression, and how we develop our sense of self-worth and confidence through the entire chart and all the parts. So I'm excited to dive into this next episode, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's do it. Hi, everyone. We're back for episode 2 of our blend of astrology and IFS. And I'm here today again with Sabrina Conrad. Hi, Sabrina. Welcome back.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for episode 2. Today we're going to dive into the sun. So we were looking at the moon and the mother archetype and sort of those emotional parts and attachment. And now we're going to zoom out and we're going to look at the sun today and self, right? And all the dynamics of building a healthy ego, like ego development and all the things that come with that core sense of identity and expression, being seen, standing in our power, all of those great things. Before we dive in, would you just once again kind of introduce yourself and your work and what parts work is, IFS is, so that people who are here for the first time can understand that?
Sure. My name is Sabrina Conrad. I'm a certified IFS psychotherapist. I'm based in Toronto, Ontario, and I only use IFS therapy. And IFS therapy is this idea that we're composed of parts, and parts can be an emotion, it can be a thought, and they have kind of roles. And some of those roles might kind of play out negatively in our life, and some of them might play out positively. But once we start to look at it and kind of communicate with our parts, we learn that even the ones that play out negatively, it's almost always they're being done from a positive intention. And so much of the work is kind of getting to know it and mapping our parts and updating parts that might be stuck in the past.
Nice. Okay. And obviously, very similarly, in astrology, we're looking at a map, the chart itself. The sun, everybody usually knows their sun sign. That is the strongest life force, vitality, the essence of the personality. And there are core things, about your sun and a sign that everyone can relate to, but there are all the other pieces and parts and aspects to the sun. There are the other planet, like there's so much, right? So it is kind of that umbrella, if you will, and then all the other things in the chart kind of create the map for that expression. So how do you look at the self and sort of the map for self through IFS?
Yeah. Okay, so self is probably the hardest bit of IFS to understand.
Okay.
Um, and you can't intellectualize your way to self, but the idea of self is that if parts are clouds, the self is the sun. Like the self is the essence of you. It's the thing that's always there. It's not changing.
Mhm.
And so it's almost like when I work with clients and they get to a place where they're feeling like a lot of courage and compassion and confidence and clarity, it's an energy more than anything. That's and like there's a natural healing that comes when they're in self energy. It's basically like the highest sort of energy that you can feel. And
Okay.
but and
Yeah.
so self works well as like the analogy to the sun is really nice, right? Like it's perfect. Like it's the thing that's always there. It's the source of life. It's bright.
Yes, absolutely. And so the other side of that is when we can't sort of shine in that light or we feel like it's been dimmed and like you said, it's that overall essence. So in astrology, and people take different approaches. Me, I have come from this sort of thought that we are on this journey of becoming. our sun, because we live in our moon. That's our everyday. We live, that sort of emotional flow and ebb and flow every day, fight or flight, like all those things we do to survive in a day and in our lives. And that the journey is to the sun, to our highest expression, our highest, most confident sense of self and wholeness. And that all the different connections and planets and things that play in there are part of and show their sort of map to the sun. So, in this journey of becoming the sun, or the highest version of ourselves, the highest sense of self, confident and whole, how do you look at parts work in terms of that? Because is all the parts kind of in there that taking you
Oh yeah,
really?
I love that. That maps perfectly with parts work
Okay.
because so the in that idea of the journey to the sun, the idea would be that we still have like in our highest expression, we still have parts, but they're working from their best self. So like we're like a part that maybe had social anxiety, like it didn't want you to go in public because it was nervous that someone might say like that part will now like you've updated that part. Maybe it still gets nervous, but you like check in with it before going and you go together and you're not having to suppress, you're not having to compartmentalize. So you're like in your highest expression, you still have your parts, but there's this inner sense of cohesion. And like maybe like different parts might have different opinions, but you don't feel so like pulled and you don't get blended or over like flooded. You just kind of get to like be like, I like that sun perspective because you kind of get to just be versus like blending will happen where like all of a sudden you're overcome with fear or anxiety. Like in the highest expression, and this is like more theoretical, you just get to kind of like live from who you are.
Yeah, that's the courage and confidence. And even like once you're working with that or you've named it, it's like kind of like everyone says, like if you're afraid, if you name the fear, it automatically kind of starts to dissipate,
Hmm.
and you're then walking with that fear. It's, fear is false evidence appearing real, those kinds of acronyms that if you acknowledge that and name it, like you talk about naming things a lot, it automatically dispels some of it and you can walk with it, instead of letting it hold you back.
Yeah, sometimes it will dispel right away. Sometimes it gets louder before because it has
Yeah.
other things it wants you to know.
Yeah, and also there's this idea of protectors. And
Hmm.
so when we're talking about the sun, there obviously are so many things that we would build in to protect ourselves from being seen, even though we want to be seen. We
Hmm.
talk a little bit about
Exactly.
that.
And so we have protectors because they're protecting us from our exiles, and our exiles are the parts that are holding pain. They're the wounds. And so a lot of protectors, they're doing their job so that our exiles don't come up. But they inevitably always end up coming up. And so the protectors, yeah, like the goal is to kind of just we get to know them, we try to earn their trust, and eventually when they kind of give us permission to go to our vulnerable places, then we can bring some healing, bring some sun to those places that have usually been like trapped. They're usually in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah, and how do you like those protective parts can come up as like that harsh inner critic or overachievers, imposter syndrome. Like I know a lot of, I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't like kind of deal with that, right? Um, or self-sabotaging, are all of those kind of related to those parts that are trying to protect us?
Yeah, yeah. And so there might not be like a definitive critic for everyone, but someone might have a voice that shows up as a critic. But then you have to kind of find out what is its MO. You have to ask it, why is it criticizing you? What is it afraid will happen if it wasn't doing that right now? And we also, not all parts have like a negative connotation. I have a part that loves to do creative things, and I
Right.
just don't bring that to therapy because it's not a problem. So it's mostly we talk about parts like the critic, but that's because those are the ones we're going to be more likely to bring to therapy.
Right, exactly, exactly. I mean, the sun is where we find our most joy, where we lead confidently. Like, so there are naturally parts that comes very easily, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we want to work with the things that might be limiting us,
Yeah.
or we feel are blocking us from really, moving forward in our lives in a way that we kind of want to, we feel, but are afraid of. And, the thing I can't help but bring in is the idea of if the if the moon is the mother, the sun is the father, that archetype, that energy, and the personal authority, the to stand in your highest sun, to be seen as equal or empowered in those kinds of things. And there is a, or even the sun is an element of the father, that big alpha life force energy, that powerful authority. And so the struggle to stand in our authority, personal authority, I think can come in a lot around the father story as well.
Yeah. And I mean, just like when we talked about moon and mother, it's so complex, right?
Oh,
Like, so you're like, even just to kind of like go inside, you're almost certainly gonna have a part that's gonna feel like you're gonna have at least opposites, like a part that's gonna say, oh, I can't say anything bad about
yeah.
my father, or I can't say, like it's just to name all the ones, and we call them polarizations when you're holding two parts that have opposite views.
Ooh,
And
okay.
that's really common. So just to kind of go inside and and then especially like when you think about it from a parenting perspective, right? So and then what you're trying to kind of what authority are you trying to instill in your child?
Yeah, like you want them to, and this is like again where different parts come up with Mars, right? You want them to exert their authority and their personal independence. That's when our kids are young and they're going through that Mars return or whatever it's like, they're saying no. And you want to encourage that,
Mhm.
for them to have that personal authority. But then on this like respect the rules and the where we behave and the those kinds of things. But absolutely there is that how do we create that space for our kids and our to build their own sense of personal authority. And I
Yes.
do believe it's in giving them choice also. Not like you're going to do this and do as I say, not as I do, and like those kinds of things that come in, but actually space to give them choice. And even in with Venus, you're looking at teaching your children how to negotiate.
Mhm.
People say, how, why am I negotiating with a 5-year-old? Because you want to teach them the art of negotiation, right? You want to communicate with them and teach them that they can have their view, they have choice, and the consequences of choices they make.
Yeah.
That's how they learn and they develop their own sense of healthy ego with a mutual respect of what someone else wants or desires or needs. So there's constant, like you're talking about polarities, that's all in astrology. The entire thing is polarity. And if you're looking at Aries Libra, you're looking at the polarities of, relationship and partnership. And Aries is the sun is exalted in Aries. So it's like the self, the persona. And
Mhm.
when we're young, our persona is projected onto us by
Mhm.
others. You're so
Mhm.
cute, you're this, you're that. And then as we get older, we're separating from that and like, do I think I'm that? Am I that? And so the journey of sort of separating from that core upbringing or experience and then learning who we are, stepping more fully into the sun and our own expression.
Right. Yeah. And then this morning I was just Googling like my daughter's Leo sun in second house. And then, there was this idea of like affirmations to give her, like, and it was not that she's right, 'cause they might tend to be competitive. And it's like, how can I reinforce that she's great despite, like you're
Yes.
right, not you're the brightest.
Exactly. I mean, Leo, the sun is at home in Leo. That's it's its natural place. So I will always tell parents or anyone who's Leo, like you shine naturally, like you can't not shine. So it's about, allowing that spotlight to show on shine on others is
Mhm.
and they're extremely generous and giving and do that, but there's just that element, that part that wants the attention too and the spotlight and thinks they need to perform to
Exactly.
get that. And that's another element of the sun is performance, and just sort of like wanting to shine and let me show you who I am and what I can do and how good I am and how valuable I am. See me.
Yes, and then how can I, like if you have a child that's a Leo, how can you make them feel loved and seen even when they're not performing so that they internalize that they don't need to perform for your love?
Yes. Yes,
And
absolutely.
And like even naming things like, oh, when you got quiet there, what were you feel like? So, and like so that they can feel loved even when they're feeling shame or embarrassment or they didn't do what like as well as they hoped. And how can they, having that scene and that connection there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's beautiful. Like, and a great way of helping them recognize that for sure. And the even the opposite of that with like an Aquarius who naturally like doesn't fit in. There's like that just, wanting to stand out and wanting to fit in, that dichotomy of like, feeling like you're part of the group, but you want to shine as an individual. So, and the sun in Aquarius is at its furthest. So he's like in his detriment because he's furthest from the sun. So it seems like it's harder to be seen and you don't feel like you fit anywhere. So it's
Hmm.
like helping the child understand that they are unique and diversity and individuality is like a beautiful thing, and you can be part of a wonderful group and still be yourself, and that creates compassion. I think that's another beauty of astrology is being able to create compassion for our differences.
Yes. And say it was an Aquarius parent coming into therapy, maybe that wants to shine. So we would kind of name like what are the parts that don't want to feel it, like aren't part of the
Yeah.
group, are scared to shine, and then to find out why are they, what are they afraid of? And like with the polarization, when you have two parts that are hold completely opposite views, once you can kind of ask them like what they're trying to do and what they're afraid will happen if they don't do it, you'll find that they both end up like the conclusion usually is they're both trying to help you in whatever way, and usually in opposite ways. And so then when you can kind of name that, the intensity can decrease. It's like, okay, you're trying to help me in this way, you're trying to help me in this way. There's sort of like they don't need to stop doing what they're doing, but the intensity of how hard they're battling each other can come down a bit.
That makes sense.
Especially if the Aquarius person, like say you learn from talking to that part that doesn't want them to shine. Say they were bullied when they were a kid. Like then we can kind of go to that kid that was bullied and we can kind of update them, bring them into the present, heal them. And then we can show that one that was really scared, like, look, this one's not trapped anymore. And then that one might pull back a little bit and be a little less afraid.
Ah, that makes sense. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah, and so like so you're speaking to like parenting triggers, right? So if there's a trigger to reflect on your own needs for being seen or validated or those things, like because I feel like mothers are always focused on the family and their parents, and so they naturally don't feel, I think, seen, you
Yeah.
know?
And then it's like, and actually that's why it's so important for, if a mom like in her other non-mom life like has creative pursuits, to pursue them too. So then you're less likely to be triggered if you're feeling whole and more balanced in the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And that's a journey and a battle too. And because wanting to find that balance and not feeling guilty for having that or wanting that. And then once you do, I think that's really interesting that you brought that up too, because once I feel like moms, like, you feel like really confident maybe in what you're doing and raising your children and focusing on that. And then you do have these other pursuits and these other things where they bring up different parts of you to
Mhm.
work with, in the ego. Like I can feel really confident in what I'm doing over here. Like I've got the language, I've got the tools. I feel really confident in this area, what I'm doing. But then over here, that son goes, well, I don't know. I don't feel like I have the same confidence over here as I do over here.
Yeah,
And
and it can go both ways. Like I feel like if you're a working mom, like one of the
yes,
gifts of being a working mom is that you get to have that area of work life where hopefully you get to feel good and
yes,
challenged intellectually and emotionally. And it can go the other way too. Like if you're a stay-at-home mom and then you're like maybe struggling a little bit to like where do I fit out
yes, so
parent.
true. I don't
Yeah.
think everyone is built to be a stay-at-home mom either. It's like it's definitely not, but you can feel like you're confident over here and doing well at your job and fulfilled, and then you come home and it's a struggle and it's not, or you don't know where you don't feel as confident over there. Um, yeah, so there's parts of your sun, like you can shine in different ways in different places.
Yeah, and it can sometimes be so much easier to feel confident at work because it's more goal oriented and it's more specific and tangible
Yeah.
than a kid where it's like that is so you never know what their day was like, what you're gonna get, and it's not goal like the goal of parenting is always connection. Connection's so it's not measurable in the same way that completing a work task is.
Oh yeah. And it's like a moving target. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
always changing.
Yes, exactly. So your work parts almost are going to feel very likely to feel flustered around parenting because they're basically like, what do we do? How do we know we're doing a good job?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I do also believe that you can do all the things the best you can and still you're not going to be able to protect your child from certain experiences, from certain, you know, uh develop behaviors, maybe even, you know what I mean, that they evolve into or grow into or have. You can't blame yourself, if just like, parents who do everything right, they think they have this like great, family, they had a great their childhood was great, or they're, raised their families in a way that they feel like they have solid, children they're putting out into the world. And then they go get wrapped up in something that like takes them down a rabbit hole of addiction or something else. And you're like, where did that come from? That was not part of this. So it's like, but this child has their own journey. And for whatever reason, this happened and this is their experience. Or maybe they were holding parts in themselves that even though they had this nice, good childhood or secure home, needed a place or, you know what I mean, an experience to further their development.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's always so interesting because like some folks will come into therapy and be like, "Oh, I had everything." And then when you kind of go further and you look at their parts, a lot of parts maybe didn't feel seen or didn't, so the parents were there, but maybe they always felt like there was this set of expectations and yeah, whereas and then the other I do have some clients where it's like they felt super loved, they felt super seen and they're struggling with some adult things and they don't have a reason. Like there's nothing really from their childhood. So it's just that's their journey.
Yeah.
It's
And I
not
think
always, you can't always blame it.
no, and that's the thing I tell people too, like you can't blame your chart. It's a map and you have like, knowledge is power and it empowers you to be able to make different choices, and like I think what I'm learning from you about parts is like to understand you have parts of yourself that you can name and work with and they don't it doesn't box you in. It's and limit you. It's supposed to free you and liberate you in order to walk more fully in your true self, acceptance,
Yes.
self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and even forgiveness of our parents. We talk about forgiving our mothers, forgiving our fathers for they were doing what the best they could with what they knew, their own journey, right?
Mhm.
And that's where lineage and ancestral stuff comes down, and you know what
And yeah. But I always tell people like you don't have to forgive and like first of all, you can blame your parents and you can have
I mean?
parts that are angry at them and you can have parts that are angry at them forever and that's okay.
Right.
There's no pressure for parts that are angry to let go of that. Like if there's like if you connect with those parts that are like I'm righteous about this anger, beautiful, great. And you might have another part that's like we need to forgive, we can't hold on. That's okay too. That part can hold, but you can't force forgiveness and you can blame where you came from. Like absolutely. And then at some point though, then you decide kind of what is your highest expression? Like what do you want to create with your life?
Yeah, and living, getting stuck in that blame game and just saying, hey, look, yeah, I blame them for that, but I'm choosing to go a different way. I mean, in an example, like my husband will say, he succeeded in certain ways. He feels like sometimes it's in spite of.
Hmm.
There's this thing of like, in spite of the way, I was raised or the experience that I had that hurt me or didn't feel like I was being supported or seen or what have you. I'm going to do this in spite of. I'm going to be this way or choose to live my life this way. So, but I think, and tell me what you think about this, is if there's a charge of blame or hurt or whatever, that can still influence and bring about a pain forward, even in spite of you're doing stuff, right? There's still this undercurrent or part of you that's dealing with that struggle.
Yeah, yeah, but and the thing is that if you had a tough upbringing, you're kind of almost never done healing from it. What can be so challenging is like you think you do all your work, then you have kids and you realize, oh my God, there was so much more pain than I even. And it's like as your kid hits certain milestones, trauma that you might not even know that you had at that age will come up. Like if
Yeah.
say you had like a period of being bullied at school that you kind of forgot about or suppressed, like as your kid hits that age that you were when you had those experiences, that's gonna come up. So you were kind of never, so the blame is, that's what I mean. It's like it's fair because you, you can excavate the pain and heal it, and then turns out there's more and more layers.
Yes.
And
Always. Always.
I don't mean it in a jaded way. It's like it's a gift as we're sort of revisiting our younger parts, and it's like, and they show us, oh, and there's this, and there's this. It's like it's a gift that they're trusting us, that they're showing us this, that we get to witness it, and then it gets kind of get filed away.
Yeah. I think that's it's about perspective, right?
Mhm.
This the sun is that big essence that like that the whole of your story, the journey of the becoming, but it's about perspective. If you're looking at and choose to, and I feel like people who want to do parts work or want to go to therapy or want to look at their chart is they are open to and willing to look at themselves and reflect,
Mhm.
and from a place of wanting to understand themselves, forgive themselves, accept the parts of themselves, feel more confident in themselves. Like that is why I think astrology is a beautiful tool for that. But there's so many wonderful tools for that, and a lot of them that can be blended and work together that aren't about giving answers, but more about opening up the realm of freedom of expression and ownership of the full story, and then choosing to write the story you want to write, to live the life you want to live, whether it's in spite of, in honor of, all of that. It's hugely complex.
Yeah, well, they're systems, right? Astrology is a system and IFS is a system. And so it's just a way to get to look
Yeah.
at what's going on.
But coming at it from I feel like when you're willing to do this stuff, aren't you coming at it from a positive place of like, what is this wanting to show me? What is this teaching me? What is this protecting me for?
Mhm.
Like you're asking those questions of like, okay, what is this part trying to help me understand or help me do? Or what is this part trying to protect me from? So there's this way of inquiry, um, and exploration
Yeah.
that can awaken these things in you and then liberate you a little bit, free you a little bit, lighten you a little bit, let go and put down some stuff, put down some of the things we're carrying, and then all of those lightening things, I think, allow us to shine a little brighter, a little fuller, feeling more confident, and not confident in a boastful, egotistical way, but a sense of settle. And I know who I am and I accept who I am and I am who I am.
Mhm. Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
call my one of my first enlightenment experiences when I was in a retreat, my Popeye moment. Because it was
What-
just like I
Oh,
am what I am. Popeye. Right? I was like, I call it my Popeye moment because I was like, I am what I am. And I literally, and this was after like I think 3 days of asking the question, who am I?
Mhm.
And sitting with this and emptying all the identifications and all the things. And I laughed hysterically and felt like I was high as a kite without drugs. You know what I mean? It was just like so funny and so like, of course, and I was like, I felt so good. And I was like, this is why, but there was a moment.
Mhm.
Enlightenment is our moments. You can't live there. You want to, but you can't because life comes in, circumstances come in, relationships come in, and there's other parts. But
Yeah.
on a whole, I feel it's like that self, like I am who I am. And the sun is the I am. The Aries is the I
Yes.
am.
Yes,
All
it
of
is.
these things. I'm all of these parts.
Yes, and actually at the end of like a good IFS session with a client, almost always they'll say, I feel so spacious. Like they have that space inside. And even though in that moment, maybe like in the session, maybe big pain came up, but they were able to witness it and be with it. And the reward is this spaciousness.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's like an emptying.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you feel lighter, you
You
know?
feel light, you feel confident, you feel clear but it's not in this intellectualized way. It's in your being.
Your being. And then you can just be. And
And
that's
that's that sun energy. That's
yeah,
it. Like you get infused with that. It's sun energy, self energy. They're the
yeah,
same.
bring it right back to that Leo and the sun. It just shines. It just is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
And you
goal
kind
is to
of
just
uncover the
be.
clouds.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And like you're naming the clouds, you're kind of helping the clouds sort of, diffuse a little bit, and then more sun comes through.
Oh, I like that image. You know, it's funny. Been reading Suzanne Giesemann, who's a medium, and she talks about the blue sky. The clear sky is like the soul, and the clouds are just sort of like the stories. The
Hmm.
clouds are sort of coming in, our lives. And I was like, oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
And sometimes they clear, and sometimes it's really dense and foggy, and when you can sit in, whether it's meditation or walking meditation, whatever you do to kind of connect with higher self or soul, is just, I seeing this clear blue sky, just like light and free and clear, and just being, just to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And yeah, like saying goes, be yourself. Everyone else is taking. You are this unique expression. And even though all the Leo suns may have some, similar attributes, or Gemini suns or whatever. You have this whole constellation that is uniquely designed, that is you, that will help, that will influence that unique expression of the sun. All these parts, all these planets, all these combinations of energies, how they're working together, speaking to each other, positively or negatively, or challenging or supportive. It's like you're all of the parts, feels to me like all of the chart.
Exactly. And in my master's degree, I remember a professor was saying, like, your ego is your amigo. And that's true. Like, your ego is not to be vilified in the highest expression. Your parts are working together and they give you that flavor, that style, your personality. And all of that's a great thing. Like, when you're sitting in that place of confidence, that's a beautiful thing, right? Like, we welcome some of the clouds, personality, all that's parts aren't necessarily a problem.
Right. I think that's a good thing to note. And we know that if there's somebody who has a really boastful ego, really big, chances are, maybe that you could look at their astrology and go, oh yeah, here's a manifestation of how this is expressing, and it's maybe a lower vibration, or they're protecting themselves, they're being overconfident, and people can vacillate between overconfidence and complete insecurity,
Hmm.
you know?
Well, usually that will be that you have an overconfident part
Right.
protecting an exile.
And
That
that's my point, is that you can have, if you have this kind of like ego, right? Then you're clearly protecting some parts, or, there's some things in there. And so maybe that's a person who either isn't willing to look at themselves in a certain way, or reflect, or to do any of that kind of work. Um, but somebody who is truly confident, it's quieter, it's
so agree with that.
calmer, it's more compassionate. You don't have to talk about it. You don't
I
have to
so agree with
post
that.
about
Yeah,
it.
we almost used used ego in two different ways. Like there's ego the way like Carl Jung would have talked about it, which is like it's the mechanism that allows us to kind of go through life like that so that we're not always like spaced out. But then there's ego the way that our society defines it, or like Beyonce talks about, or where it's like we assume with that like a big ego, which is more that it's a boastful part or performative. And I so agree where it's like there's performative confidence versus like real and true confidence. And like
Yeah.
the performative one is so loud, um, but not necessarily like
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about baseball, and my son plays baseball. My husband played baseball, so he's big into baseball. And he always says, act like you've done it before. Like you don't have to celebrate. Just act like, this is, you've done your job. This is what you do. But I'm like, yeah, but you should celebrate a little bit. You did really good. Like, I'm like, why wouldn't you celebrate that? But I guess it's part of the game. I don't understand all of that, right? But it's like you just, you don't. And also, there's like, I can see the part where like you don't want to make the other team feel bad.
Mhm.
Like being a good sportsman is to not have that big, you know, boastful ego kind of thing, but really be like, yeah, you know, this is what it's good. So I was like, okay. So I've learned a lot about someone who does, even though he is this kind of alpha person in some ways, like he's like this quiet confidence too. He doesn't
Mhm.
have to show. It's like, and I think it comes from those kinds of experiences too. I feel like there are things and activities we can get our children into that can naturally help them build that sense of confidence, in quiet confidence, and healthy ego development, and
Well, and
show
do you
too.
think you could use like a kid's chart? Do you think a mom could come to you or a parent could come and then use like and be like, hey, what activities do you think would be good?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's children who, the mom be like, I don't know why they don't want to play sports. I've got everybody in sports and this one just resists, doesn't want to go to practice. And I was like, okay, well, they're more air. He gets lost in books. He wants to read. Like, don't force him. And I would ask the question, why do you want them to play sports?
Mhm.
Well, because I did, and society says it's good for them. It's good for these reasons. Yeah, it is good, and those are good, healthy qualities that they could develop. But if it's not who they are and they're not enjoying it or drawn to it, don't force them. I don't see the point in that. And then other kids who have all of this energy, the outlet of a taekwondo class and those kinds of things are really good. And actually, my son just started jujitsu and judo and all of these things this year. And the owner of the shop was talking to me about how a parent came to him with a child who had um, uh, been aggressive, was being aggressive and not necessarily bullying per se, because they do help, this kind of stuff helps with the confidence when you've been a child who's been bullied, but a kid who was more aggressive. And he was like, the parent was like, you want me to bring him to jujitsu when he already has this aggression? Yes, because we can show him how to, the gentle way and how to utilize his energy and in this and hone it and things like that. And you don't have to have this conflict. And so it was like kind of teaching him how to use that power and that rage in like a healthy way. You don't need to fight. And if you have this kind of quiet confidence in that you can handle yourself in any situation, you don't have to fight. And that's the goal, right? To be able to manage yourself in a conflict or something, but the goal is to avoid it. Right. And so I thought that was really interesting that the mom was like, why would I bring him to something physical and intense like that when he's already kind of starting fights or getting into fights? It's like, let's hone this in a positive way. Let's show him that he can work with this and it doesn't have to be um, a bad thing. Like, how can we utilize this in a good way?
That makes so much sense because it's a channel, it's containment for
Yeah.
that energy. It's a
Yeah.
safe place for it to be expressed.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think the same thing with children because it helps with self-confidence. It says right on the thing, like, bullying, self-confidence, like those kinds of things. Those are activities that really build that inner, authority that doesn't have to be aggressive necessarily. And I think that's an
Exactly.
interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, true authority, true confidence versus like what society maybe shows as like this
Mhm.
is what authority looks like or this is what confidence looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sports, especially, I feel like, especially for like an only child, but sports is a really great way of learning, you know, to be a team and support each other and, dealing with unique different personalities and how they manage in certain situations. And there's just so many lessons in life, and so it is value in putting your child in sports in sort of to help them develop their ego, you know, um, in a healthy way. I definitely think there's lots of different activities. And it can be individual activities, and the chart can show where a child might do better on their own than engaged in activity, you know?
Or there's
So,
maybe activities that are more like I was thinking about gymnastics, like that's
yeah,
you're like with other people, but it's more individualistic. So if you
right.
have a that's more individual,
Yeah.
that could be a good physical place.
Yeah. So I do think there are definitely things that parents can do, and the chart can kind of show and give an indicator of, what kinds of things. I mean, I have a Pisces sun. I tried all kinds of creative things. Like, I'm like, he's my like music or art or whatever. And yeah, he did. He absolutely like took art class, loved it, did really well when he was young, very loved like creative things, music. He was really into music for a while, and now he plays baseball, and it's like so it's like not really the creative thing I thought. So you
Mhm.
have to give your but he has all his Pisces is in the 11th house of groups and friends.
Mhm.
So it makes sense that the things he wants to do are more group orientated, even though he's creative, right? So there are parts of him that are very creative. So I feel like when you're looking at the chart, you can also look and observe. And I always tell parents, watch your child, observe. What are they drawn to? Support that. You can give them some, hey, let's try this class, see if you like it. If you don't, no problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. We're talking about sports and sun. It makes sense. It's just
Yeah,
appropriate. We're talking about confidence, ego. It just makes sense that sports would come up.
right. Exactly. It's a natural, I think it's a healthy way of developing a healthy ego.
Yeah. And what else do we want to kind of
Well, I
share?
was wondering, we should kind of give, do you want to give people's kind of a place to start? Like if they're curious about this, I mean, obviously you can look to your sun sign, what it might, you know, reflect or what do you think about being seen or, that sort of
Mhm.
those sun qualities.
I like that question that you just said. What do you think about being seen? That's such a good one. Because we all need to be seen to some degree, right? Every sign. Like we
Yes.
all need to be validated. We all need to be acknowledged. I think moms probably especially because so much of the work of caretaking is
Mhm.
invisible and it's a mental and emotional load. And so like yeah, especially for the moms listening, like for them to see where do I want it need to be seen? What might be blocking me from taking steps to be seen in that direction, and that could be on a one-on-one or that could be in a more collective or public way, but yeah, that feels like a really important place to start.
And are there, and then the parts of them, like maybe asking where in their lives do they feel seen and where do they not feel seen? Those
Mm,
be representative of maybe different parts of them that they're working with in terms of
okay.
being seen or
That
no?
might be more the environment or your lifestyle. But like makes me think that they could go to you because if they're asking that question, where am I seen? And they're feeling like I'm not seen, then it could be maybe their chart could be a good indicator of like where it could, maybe there's taking a class, maybe taking, right? Like maybe there's a direction that could go where they could get that outside of the home and outside of parenting. And I think like a need that's not talked about a lot, especially for moms, is friendship and like friendship outside of like maybe the mom friends, but like maybe your identity other than that. And I have clients who struggle where it's like there's limited time, there's limited energy. You're an adult now. How do you make friends? How do you connect? And but it's so important.
Absolutely.
That feels like a something that's so important and like no one talks about.
Absolutely. And you're not going to get all your needs met or be able to be seen like in your life with being a mom.
Right. And then a lot of your friendships will like usually they sort of some of them can kind of fall away because especially when you're like having a young family because you don't have the time. And so then you're kind of in this place now you have a bit more time and then how do you make friends? How do you find people to connect with?
I mean, that's the whole thing. Being a mother can be very lonely endeavor. That is, in terms of like bringing it back to the sun and the becoming and the journey, I do feel that a big part of the work and the effort for moms is to not, the best of our ability, not lose ourselves along the way.
Yeah, and that makes me think of like 11th house too, right? Like where is your tribe? Where
Yeah,
is your group and kind of having an idea of how to manifest that.
yeah. I mean, and that's I'm an Aquarius, right? So, and I know I'm an eighth house Aquarius, so that is more of an intimate group, actually more intimate than being out on a big stage per se. So it's like I want to, it's like that Aquarius like wants to really help the masses, but like from this like safe space over here.
Yeah, like recording a podcast.
Recording a podcast from my home.
Exactly, exactly.
So I kind of feel like the next episode maybe should be looking at Mercury.
It's a huge one. Communication's a huge one.
Oh yeah.
Yes, Mercury will be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Awesome. All right, stay tuned, friends, for the next episode with Astrology and IFS around Mercury. Okay, thanks, Sabrina.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you gained some great astrology insight and inspiration from today's show. I'd love to hear, so drop me a comment or share in a review. Check out the show notes for all the details and links about today's episode, how you can connect with me on social or work with me directly. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Oh, and for my moms out there, be sure to join my private Conscious Parenting with Astrology Moms group on Facebook. Come join a growing community of like-minded mamas supporting each other in the hardest job in the world with the help of astrology. Hope to see you over there. Take care and keep nurturing the nature, friends. I'll see you on the next episode.